The church celebrates the Feast of the Assumption each year. It is our patronal feast. And as I will be away during the actual celebration of the feast, I just wanted to share just a couple of very brief reflections with you. The Feast of the Assumption oftentimes is one of those challenging feasts because people try to figure out, well, why is Mary different? Why doesn't she experience death? And we could say, oh yes, she's the mother of God, and we can use all kinds of different things, but it's really one of the beautiful teachings of the church that really gives us some reflection on things. So we might as well start with a couple of the other feasts that we have in the life of the church. We also have to recognize the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, celebrated on December 8th. It's about that notion of Mary, who is immaculately conceived so that she can be the one who is a fitting vessel for the one who is to be Savior of all. And there is a challenge there because it casts our minds back to the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve, after they have eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the tree of which they were forbidden to eat, and their eyes are opened and they recognize their vulnerability and their weakness, not only before God, but also to each other. And also the fact that sin enters into the world and that betrayal. And so when God takes them out of the Garden of Eden, it is a great mercy for them that death will occur. It's an awkward thing for us to be able to say that. But if we're mindful of what it is that's gone on, having access to the tree of life in the middle of the garden, regardless of whatever circumstances that befell Adam and Eve, they would constantly return again and again to the tree of life and live immortally, without end, eternally, but caught in that painful awareness of their own betrayal, their own shame, and their own guilt. So it is in mercy that God takes them out of the garden and sets a guard over the entrance to the tree of life so that they may not live eternally in shame and in guilt. So it is that we can speak about it, and theologically the church has proclaimed that this is how death entered into the world, and we can say that, but we always imagine for ourselves that death is this great cataclysmic event, and it is. But at the same time, we also have to be mindful, as the church teaches about our death and about the promise of resurrection, that there is constantly that hope of rising again, of rising to newness of life, cleansed from any of those experiences of sin and the residual elements of shame and guilt. In many ways, death offers us freedom, offers us new life. And perhaps when we listen to the celebration that the church offers on this feast of the Assumption of the Blessed Mary, we can oftentimes look at that situation as a great mercy to finally be freed from the toil and the realities of living the rest of her life in grief and sorrow at the loss of her son. Even though we take great confidence in the promise of resurrection and Mary is absolutely certain about Jesus' disposition, it doesn't mean that a mother's heart does not continue to grieve. And yet at the same time, we recognize that she, who was the fitting vessel in the Immaculate Conception to be the cradle which nurtured the infant Jesus, this one should not taste death. So the Feast of the Assumption has its history in the very, very beginnings of the church, stretching all the way back to the very beginnings, so far back that we have no concrete, definite statement about it. It was just simply accepted as the way that things were. No one ever questioned the holiness or the veracity or the dignity of Mary. From the very beginning, she was always revered as one of the principal apostles and disciples, and the church has held that from the very beginning. We celebrate the Feast of the Assumption in the West, in the Latin Rite churches, and in most Western denominations. We celebrate the Assumption as being lifted body and soul into heaven, to be in the presence of Christ, to not have had to go through the difficulties of death or the issues of being cleansed from those things which affect the rest of us. And she resides and rejoices and intercedes on our behalf to her Son. She takes our prayers, our concerns, and she offers them back to her Son as well, and asks again and again, because of her love for us and for all humanity. Son, take care of this, will you? When we listen to that recognition of intercession and that reality of assumption, it helps us to begin to understand what we acknowledge in our faithfulness, the power of a mother's love and the power of a son's love for the gift that was given to the world. In the East, the end of Mary's life is celebrated as the Dormition, the falling asleep of Mary. Not in death, but the falling asleep, and still raised with the angels to be one in the fullness of the life that God has prepared for us. Much has been made about this being one of those dogmatic statements that the church has made, one of the infallible statements that's been made. Keep in mind, the church has only made two of them. The Pope, by virtue of his authority as the first among equals, occupying the chair of Peter, has the opportunity to make declarations which are dogmatic in nature in issues of faith and morals. The church has never, no pope has ever spoken dogmatically and authoritatively from the chair of Peter, infallibly, in a matter of morals. But in relationship to the Blessed Mother, both statements that have been made are in relationship to her dignity. But these are things that were so long held that they have their very roots and indeed are really the roots of many of our traditions. So as the church celebrates the Feast of the Assumption, we are mindful of the power of a mother's love and of a son's love. We're conscious of the gifts of intercession, of someone who prays on our behalf and who is a great source of strength for us in the midst of our sorrows and our difficulties and our challenges. So perhaps on this Feast of the Assumption, you may take a little bit of an extra time and ask for the intercession of the Blessed Mother for the work of our parish, for our continued success, and for our continued growth as we navigate the challenges of time and space. May God bless you on this Feast of the Assumption. May we always walk